This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Always happy to bring a new guest onto the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, Devin Jackson of the Philadelphia Inquirer does a lot of the Philadelphia Eagles draft coverage over there. Got to talk to you a ton over East, West, and Senior Bowl. Talked about a lot of prospects there. I guess the first thing I want to get started on today is prospects that scare you. I want to be specific here because like Diego Pavia could be somebody who could scare you, but why would you draft him, right? Like he's like 5'8", right? But prospects who you see the upside is there where you're like, wow, that could be something. And then the downside is really high too, right? Like for me, I'll throw one out there. Casey Concepcion is one that I'm like, could be Zay Flowers. Could be Corey Coleman, right? Like both those outcomes are certainly on the table for a player like that. When you look at this draft class, you look at the guys that are going to be available, especially for the Browns at 6 and at 24. Who are the guys you look at where you're like, that prospect would scare the shit out of me when it comes to drafting them, because you could justify it, but boy.
Yeah, I think first place I'll start. I think the first guy that comes to mind, like first round wise, that I'd be scared of is Peter Woods, man. I'd be worried about where he fits, in terms of NFL. Like, is he a guy that is he like his sophomore tape? Is he more of his junior tape? Is he a 3-tech? Is he a 1-tech? Where does he play on the defensive line? Is he a 3-4 defensive end? It just feels like for me and for the NFL, the talent is obvious. It's obvious that he's a really good player. The testing didn't show an elite athlete. He kind of had a strange pro day where he only did a 10-yard split. And just the way that he tested, wasn't the way that people, especially me, expecting him to test. And, I just don't know where he's going to be valued in terms of like, is he going to be a game wrecking, defensive tackle? Is he going to be the pass rush specialist? It just doesn't feel like there's anything specifically that, you can count your hand on in terms of like, he's going to do this at the NFL level. He's going to be someone that, should be a day one starter that, can produce 6 or 7 sacks in his first year. He just feels like a guy that you're just hoping that the things that he showed as a sophomore, the explosiveness he showed at times on tape, it carries over to the NFL, because there were times this year where he just wasn't the dominant player that you expected him to be coming into the year. And there were times that he just got blown off the ball as well in run defense. So I think this interior defensive lineman class, especially at the top, particularly scares me, because there are guys that, feel like they should be going much higher than they are. But for one another, they have flaws. But Peter Woods comes to mind for me first, of a guy that, I felt really strongly about, coming into the year, and it felt like he's a top 10 level player. But, he's hovering, in that early second round range for me, and I really think he's gonna have to land in a good spot to really turn into a surefire, potential high caliber defensive tackle in the NFL.
What do you do with prospects like that, right? Like I remember this with Grant Delpit, where Grant coming into the season, you thought he was going to be like kind of in that same conversation that like Caleb Downs ended up being in his career, where it's like, oh, he's one of the best safeties we've seen. He's going to be the best LSU safety since Matthew. And then that final season hits and there's more problems than you anticipated showing up. Like, how do you value where a prospect was at the beginning of the season? Because this happened a lot with the quarterbacks, right? Kate Klubnik's a great example of people are like, oh, he's going to be a first-round pick, or Garrett Nussmeier, right, being a first-round pick. And then the season happens, and then now all of a sudden you're hearing a lot about like 4th, 5th round for these guys. Is it that the evaluation was wrong to begin with that pushes those guys back? Or is it maybe something in their play, like if that guy had come out a year earlier, does he go in the top 10? Or do these flaws get kind of discovered in the draft process if that guy comes out early? We just found out during the course of the year. Like, how do you square those kind of like players? Because I think those are always the fascinating ones for fans, because you're like, oh, well, this guy was a first round pick, so you can kind of like, oh, we got a first round pick, third round value type thing, you know?
I think you have to understand that what you do most recently matters more so than, sometimes a body of work. And I think for me, when I find a player that I feel a little bit like uncertain about, I just watch more games and I just try to watch more and figure out, is this guy matching what my previous thoughts were? And if not, I go back and look and see, did I overestimate, certain aspect of his game? Did I kind of overlook maybe something that I should have been looking more closely at? That turns out to be a flaw that maybe I thought was going to be something minor or was something minor that I felt like might get addressed. I think you have to, when you're going into the season, sometimes in summer scouting, you leave some room of interpretation, some room to kind of figure out and kind of maneuver if something doesn't go the way that you're expecting it to go, if they don't develop the way that they're supposed to develop, or what you expect. All right, what's going to happen now? Where does this lie now? And I think you also want to see, all right, if something isn't matching up on their film or tape, how they test athletically. I think that's the next fallback of it. If I talk in front of this prospect, and you go to the combine, you talk to these guys, do you get a good feeling of like, do they understand their own flaws and their own things that they struggle with or have struggled with in their career? So I think it's kind of like one of those things you just trying to gather more and more and more to figure out why things didn't go the way that they did in that particular season. And I think from there you try to determine, all right, do my now that my priors don't match up, where can I realistically stack him against guys that maybe have less questions about him? And I think with a guy like Peter Woods, like Jermont McCoy to some degree has had some of that this year because he felt like going into the year he's going to be a first round pick, didn't play all year, really didn't test until his pro day. So there was a lot of question marks about that. Obviously, Jordan Tyson is having the same discussion right now in terms of like the tape is really good when he's healthy. Is he going to be healthy at the NFL level? So I think you just kind of parse it out and try to figure out a middle ground where, all right, he's not going to come in where I thought he was going to come into going to year. Do I feel more comfortable taking him here, like taking Peter Woods here versus taking a guy on day 2 or day 3? And I think that's kind of how you go through that process and figure out, are these guys worth taking in the first round? Are they worth doing so, even though they have a strong body of work in previous years, but not so much this year? I think if they don't give you answers to some of the questions you may have during the process, I don't think you can justify, feeling like you have to take him in the first round just because you feel like teams will like him. I think you really have to go through that process and figure out, like, is he going to be the best player that he can be in a few years? Or is he on this negative trajectory where, this is only a start of other problems to come?
Yeah, it's like kind of like I remember Robert Incondici, right? Remember he was like the all-time 5-star guy. He got like 5 dudes scholarships at 2 different schools. I remember it was like a crazy recruiting process. And like I think he ultimately, even though he had like a disappointing college career, he went in the second round just because he was like, hey man, that was the number 1 overall prospect at one point, right? Like, and he did have some of those tours. Another one was what's his name? Greg Little? The tackle? You remember Greg Little?
Yeah.
Like I remember Greg Little. Like it is interesting, like how much teams will factor in like what they would call pedigree into a draft decision of like, hey, this guy did have the tools, but maybe you just need to work with him or something went wrong mentally with the player. And I think we need more kind of information about how the NFL goes about figuring out that. Right, like we know a lot about how they figure out if a player can play football, and what that scouting process is like. But I really want to know, what is that evaluation process for like what a player is going to be mentally and what they count or don't. Because you don't want to be like Atlanta. You get James Pierce, and I don't think James Pierce going to play this year, right?
Yeah, yeah, he shouldn't play this
Yeah.
year for
So
sure.
it's like you can't you can have all that talent, but if coaches love saying the best ability is availability, but then they love to overlook shit like that, right? So it's like, are we gonna look at that as serious as injury? It's one of my things with like the Deshaun Watson failure. It's like, hey, I think at some point we gotta be open to the fact that part of the reason that failed is because the Browns vastly underestimated the effect that him going through that big of a fall of grace would have to his mental and his ability to play the quarterback position, which is all about confidence. Like, how can you retain confidence when you feel like people think that you are one of the most disgusting things you could be, right? Like, it is what it is there, right? I don't think teams think about that enough. Or sometimes they think about it, but they only think about it for like selfish reasons. And it gets them caught in certain blind spots where it's like, well, he's not going to get suspended for that. Right. Like, so yeah, we'll go ahead and get him. But, if a guy doesn't listen to his coach in practice enough, then, all of a sudden that guy drops 4 rounds. Right. It's interesting to see how teams pick and choose when it comes to that. Hey, let me talk to you about my sponsor for this year, PrizePicks. It's a fun way to win cash while you're watching your favorite teams. Forget complex betting rules. Their app is designed to be incredibly easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Speaking of, here are my picks for this upcoming NFL season. They have Myles Garrett at 14 sacks here. I think he will get more than 14 sacks. Joe Burrow at 3,875 passing yards. I think he'll be a 4,000-yard passer. I'm going to go with more. They have Derrick Henry at 1,224 yards. I'm going to go less than that. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You can follow me on the app at KWEN_C to see all of my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineups when you download the app using the link in the description. Players who are some of the skill players that scare you in this draft that maybe it's not an injury red flag, but it's just something you've caught along the way in the process where you're like, that concerns me, right?
Yeah, I think Brandon Cisse, the South Carolina defensive back, I just have never been a guy that, I know that he's kind of fluctuated between being a late first round corner. Some people thought, maybe he could go late first round. I have him kind of in the middle of round 2, early round 3, kind of in that bucket. I just never felt like he played physically enough at the quarterback position for a guy that is someone that can be pretty disruptive at the catch point. I thought I think there's like a big discussion, like I feel like around cornerbacks that if you don't find the ball in the air, how good can you be at the NFL level? And I kind of worry about him a little bit in that space. Like he has all the tools, like very physically gifted, speed, recovery ability, has some pretty good ball production at South Carolina. But, I don't know. The player to me just feels a little bit, you know, I don't know if I value him over some other guys in this class. Like, I didn't think his press man coverage technique, like jamming receivers and disrupting their timing, was great. Feels like he's more of like a really good athlete, but I am not sure you feel comfortable with him being potentially your top corner on your defense. Like if he's a CB2, if he's a CB3, maybe a guy that develops a little bit over the course of his time. But the way that he's talked about, I think in the consensus in the draft community, I'm not sure he's better than a guy like, Chris Johnson from San Diego State. I'm not sure he's better than a guy like D'Angelo Ponce, who's undersized, but has a ton of ball production, is always there in the hip pocket, can find the ball in the air, all those different things. So I think he's my CB6 in this class. And I'm just not sure that he's going to be, more than an average start at the NFL level, because I do worry about him locating the football in phase of coverage, and just being more physical. Like, I feel like teams are going to run at him, at the NFL level, because he's not super physical as a tackler. And, he has some splash plays making tackles, but I don't think it's consistent, or wasn't consistent over the course of the season.
Yep. Are there any measurables for you this year that when you saw it scared you off of a prospect this year, or made you a little bit more hesitant than you were coming into them?
Yeah, I think measurables is always an interesting one, because I feel like it does in some case matter. I'm not gonna lie, like Cassius Howe worries me in his arm length wise specifically, because I feel like, yes, he's like a very explosive player. He can dip under offensive tackles. But in terms of the running game, like, I don't see a lot of stack shed ability, specifically in the running game. And then when he's going against those tackles that have really long arms, like he went against Markel Bell, who I think has the longest arm length in this class at like 36 and I think 3/8 inch arms. It was clearly a problem trying to pass rush against him. Like he just had a problem like separating. He had a problem getting around him. And as explosive and as athletic you can be at on the edge. I feel like how he still needs that ability to be able to get into the chest of offensive linemen. Things happen so quickly at the NFL level. Like things are the pass rushes happen. I mean, under 3 seconds, you need to get there. And when he's utilizing his speed, he can do that. But you also have to have a power element to be a guy, especially is probably going to be just a early career third down player or early career pass rush specialist. You got to be able to mix it in and mix it up. And I'm worried a little bit about the measurables there, because I feel like, yes, everyone kind of talks about Ruben Bain's measurables and whatnot, but he's still consistently getting into the chest of offensive tackles and using that power and pushing the pocket. Howell, I don't think, brings down enough of a consistent basis where you feel 100% confident that that's not going to be a factor at the NFL level.
I wonder how much of Markel Bell's interviews are really just people trying to figure out how Ruben Baines handled that length, right?
Yeah, it has to be, right? Like it's like him and Francis Malinoa, like they probably got so many questions about Ruben Bain. Like, all right, well, how did he handle you guys? How did he, get past you guys with his short arms, and everyone in the Miami program and that have gone against him seem to think that it hasn't mattered.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those interesting things because like edge is one of them positions like boxing where it's like you can get an outlier just because he's just really good at fighting, right? Like just really good at doing like the hand stuff, the hand placement, really quick there. And that seems to be what Ruben Baines' jam is that he's able to just still get that pressure, even with those, well, it was like what, 30.8 inch arms? It's small. Like I got 30-inch arms. I'm not an edge rusher in the NFL, right? But the tape don't really lie on him. The one player that I'm like, I feel like it's more of a concern for a specific team versus like him as a prospect. Like Carnell Tate's 10 split, it bugs me for Cleveland because it's like I don't really care what his top speed is. Top speed's kind of overrated for a wide receiver, in my opinion. It's like the difference of, if he catches something wide open, is he going to get ran down or is he not, right? Like kind of like same conversation with a running back. But how quick can you get to your top speed, right? I think he's at 185 and he had a 1.61 10 split, which is like, I mean, you would expect like TJ Watt to have like a 1.61 10 split, which is concerning for me just because like if the Browns get him, he's not going to be downfield intermediate where that matters a little less, where he has more time to get on his horse. He's going to have to do a lot of like quick stuff. And if he can't accelerate quickly, he's going to struggle early in a place like Cleveland where there needs to be a low barrier of entry for whatever you're doing at wide receiver for quarterback. Now, if Carnell Tate goes to like Washington, yeah, it's going to be awesome. Like that's gonna work out. That's the exact kind of place he could go and be really helpful because he's really great at the contested catch stuff, good downfield. But it's like specific places you're like, I think that probably hurts you more than it helps you in a place like Cleveland. Is there any prospect for you when you look at it, you're like, man, I love this dude, but this just I can't deal with this in Philly the way that Philly plays or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I feel like with Philly, like there are certain things that you just gotta be able to do to make things work. I'll probably go offensive line here, just because I feel like that is probably where they're leaning most likely in terms of where they might go. Um, but yeah, so I'll go with Max Ihanicher from Arizona State. I think the thing that bugs me a little bit about his potential fit in Philly is that I don't think he has a strong anchor right now. And as we kind of discussed off air, like the big strength of the Eagles with Jalen Hurts at quarterback has been the time to throw
Mm.
and not giving up leverage, not getting pushed back into the quarterback. And I think that's going to matter a lot for the next tackle that they end up drafting to replace Lane Johnson when he eventually retires, which could be next off season, which could be in the next few off seasons. I think with offensive line, like the core strength has to be there in Philly. It has to be. I think when you think about the way that they have operated, it's obviously going to change a little bit under Sean Mannion this year. I think you can't be a offensive tackle that gets pushed back a little bit and can't anchor down and can't mitigate power. I'd be worried about him doing that because I don't think that's really a huge strength in this game right now. Like obviously he can get better over the next few years, but if you threw him out in Philly next year, teams are just going to power rush him, and then you get pushed into pushed back into Jalen Hurts, and then he's forced to scramble and try to make something happen outside the pocket, and just becomes an unideal situation for Philly. So I think that probably comes to mind for me and why I'm a little more hesitant in taking him. Not that I don't think the upside is there, not that I don't think he can turn into a pretty good tackle at the NFL level, but I think that ability, trying to build up core strength, trying to be able to handle power rushes a little bit better, anchoring. I think that takes time to really develop. And if you're on a timeline where that could be 2-3 years away, well, are you ready to take that type of investment, that type of player where it could turn out he never really gets good at that and never really consistently handles it good. I think with offensive tackles specifically, we're always thinking about upside and what they could be in a few years, and they have a high upside, have the highest ceiling. Well, what's the floor?
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be, you know, top half of the league tackle? If he can't anchor and if he can't handle power rushers, probably not. I think the run game too aspect of it. He does a really good job climbing to the second and third level, but he's not really a big displacement guy either in the run game. So I think those combination of things of like, the power to move guys in the run game and then the ability to anchor against power. I think those will be two thing areas, kind of crutch areas of me feeling confident about him being the right tackle of the future.